Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Season 4 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. It was called The Griffin Incident. And as the episode starts, James Kirk, La'an, and Spock are on their way back from a future Federation leader's retreat when they detect a mysterious signal from an unknown region of space, so they go investigate. They come across the USS Griffin, a Starfleet ship that went missing without a trace 9 years previously. Of course, they immediately beam over to the ship to investigate. The first thing they notice is that they aren't floating, and that there's artificial gravity operating on the ship, despite the fact that there's no scientific reason why it should be. Soon things get weirder. Kirk thinks he hears a baby cry that no one else hears. Spock is getting no signs of anything worrying, but suddenly the computers all flash on, and, most importantly, life support is on, but not indefinitely. They have 60 minutes to figure out what happened before the life support shuts off. They learn that there are no escape pods or shuttles, but also that there's no record of the shuttles or pods leaving. As the three of them walk, they see a ghostly pale woman who whispers, "I've been waiting for you." They give chase, but she disappears within seconds. Unfortunately, they find there's not enough power to transport out of the ship, according to Kirk. Spock does, however, find that there are faint traces of negatively charged ions, which makes Kirk ask Spock if he means ghost. They find phaser marks on a wall surrounding a boarded-up door. Starfleet, Klingon, and Vulcan phaser scars are all identified. It looks like someone was locked in the room, and someone else tried to break them out. La'an and Spock begin working to get into the door, while Kirk is distracted when he again hears the sound of a baby crying. He begins to wander off, but La'an shakes him from his trance. They make it inside the room, which turns out to be the med bay, where they find a stack of empty, folded body bags. They decide to split up. La'an and Spock share a kiss before she goes with Kirk to the bridge. Spock stays behind in the med bay to try to look up records when one of the body bags falls. He picks it up and sees that it says Vulcan on it. Kirk shares some details about Carol and David with La'an, and how Carol had never been a fan of Starfleet, afraid he would die alone somewhere in space. At that point, a creepy body slinks behind them, moving like a disconnected marionette. When they turn to look, it's gone, and La'an does not get a reading of negative charged ions. Meanwhile, Spock's been getting details about the crew. The ship was not boarded or hit with a disease or cosmetic anomaly. The bodies were removed by Chief Security Officer Rose Harper, who had filed a number of security reports of erratic behavior prior to this happening, but everyone was fully checked out and medically cleared to return to work. In the end, there were 13 strangled crew members, 8 who had been stabbed, and 257 who were transported to open space while still alive. Suddenly, the door slams closed, locking Spock into the med bay. And even more suddenly, there are corpses on the tables zipped in the body bags. La'an is watching a video of Harper. It's glitchy, but she can tell that Harper believes something is taking over the ship. She tells Kirk they have to get off the ship, but out the window, he sees their shuttle in pieces. They only have 20 minutes of life support left. Kirk thinks he can get an SOS out if he can get more power to the comms. Behind Spock, one of the bodies sits up and unzips the bag. Inside is T'Pring, Spock's former fiancée. She insists that she is not an illusion. She explained how, when she was hiking, she was injured and animals started circling, how she had a panic attack, by human standards, and began repeating a Vulcan poem to center herself, which brought her back and helped her to survive. Meanwhile, La'an has moved to engineering in the hopes of redirecting power. She watches another video of Harper, who insists she can't let whatever is happening there spread among Starfleet. Someone or something sneaks up behind La'an and puts a hand on her shoulder. It's Harper. Kirk is on the bridge when he notices a little wind-up toy marching across the floor. He had bought it for David because he was supposed to spend the weekend with him, but then he got a call about the retreat and bought the toy for his son to make up for his absence. But then he hears the baby crying again, and he moves forward looking for the sound, seeing a hand come up through one of the computer cables. T'Pring takes the blame for ruining her relationship with Spock, but she thinks she can get them back together. So she shoots him. La'an is still with Harper, who is speaking to her softly. Suddenly, she's surrounded by ghostly people like Harper. "You are not a monster," Harper says. Then the lights go up and reveal their spooky guests. "You are one of us," they say. They don't appear to be trying to attack La'an or moving at all, but their existence is still unsettling. Spock wakes up and finds that he is tied to a bed. T'Pring realizes what is holding Spock back, she tells him, and it's his Vulcan side. So she takes a pair of scissors and cuts off his ear tips. Kirk's SOS seemed to work because soon Sam, Ortegas, Pike, Uhura, and Number 1 transport in. Kirk warns them that there appears to be a survivor on board and that he heard David in the comm board. Sam tells him that David and Carol are on their way to Epsilon 5. Meanwhile, Uhura thinks she can transport everyone out if they go one at a time. La'an gets on the elevator and directs it to take her to the bridge, but it instead takes her to deck 17. 3 times. On the 3rd time, she gives up and gets out on deck 17. A door opens and closes on its own. Inside that room, she finds smears of blood on the wall and a big knife. Another Harper video plays, with her lamenting that she failed to keep her crew safe. La'an backs away and Uhura and Ortegas show up. La'an is so relieved she gives Uhura a hug, which concerns Ortegas. She says, "Whatever happened here must be really bad if you're hugging." Uhura is ready to start transporting people, and Ortegas is first. La'an takes over the controls and starts the transport, but it fails. Something is badly wrong, and Ortegas is flashing in and out of the transporting state. Uhura stops La'an from doing whatever she's doing, and she's furious. La'an set Ortegas to transport into herself, she says. So Uhura takes over and fixes it, and then Uhura runs out mad. Kirk asks his brother how he balances Starfleet and family. He says, "I don't, but I do the best I can." He sees the toy and says that he has more memories of little toys from their dad than actual memories of their dad. The ghost baby starts crying again. This time Sam hears it and thinks it's his own kid. Kirk insists it isn't real, and they leave to get out of there. But the doors close instantly as they try to leave. Sam believes they're never getting off the ship. Rocks are now flying at the view screen window, cracking it. Kirk tries to get Sam away from it, but he doesn't listen. The window cracks, and Sam gets blown into it. He says, "Tell my kids I love them," and quickly gets blown all the way out through the hole in the glass intestines first. Jim finally opens the door as his brother is blown out in space. Spock, now missing part of his ear, is told by T'Pring that his heart wasn't in the right place, and she comes at him with a medical device. When Pike and Number 1 come in and rescue him, unstrapping him from the table and helping him up, at which point T'Pring disappears. Pike and Number 1 take Spock back to the medbay. While Pike straps Spock down again, Number 1 cuts her torso open and collapses, while Pike has a terrifying, manic smile on his face. "The ship is amazing," he says. "I don't have to be captain anymore. I can be the head chef." And we see that he's chopping, but instead of chopping carrots or something, he's chopping his fingers into tiny bite-sized pieces. Then he collapses. Uhura runs to the door, and Harper slashes her with a knife she found earlier. Suddenly, Uhura is begging La'an not to kill her, and La'an realizes she is standing where Harper was, holding the same knife. Uhura runs away, and Harper says to La'an, "Welcome home." Kirk finds La'an, but he hears his kid crying again. He says, "Tell me you don't hear that." And La'an says, "I hear everything now." At this point, T'Pring is back, and Spock begs her to take him and not Pike and Number 1. He starts speaking Vulcan, reciting the same poem she used during her panic attack. T'Pring grabs a big knife and approaches, but the poem works. Spock sits up suddenly, no longer strapped down. He's holding the scissors in his hand, covered in his own blood, with his ear points still clipped off. But he's alone, except for several corpses scattered around the medbay. All is quiet. Kirk is sliding away from La'an, bleeding profusely, while La'an follows menacingly. Suddenly, Kirk is transported out, so is La'an, and they're back in the Enterprise. Kirk's been stabbed, and La'an holds a bloody knife. Both are in shock, as are the crew that were in the transporter room. Later, Pike goes to check on Kirk, and Kirk can only ask about Sam. Pike promises that Sam is on leave and perfectly fine. Dr. M'Benga and Pike are walking together to the medical bay. M'Benga promises that Kirk is doing okay. He says that Spock and La'an are physically fine, but mentally not so much. Nurse Chapel sews Spock ear points back on during a house call to his quarters. He seems embarrassed to have called her there, but he couldn't stand the thought of going back to the medbay just yet. She finally asked him why T'Pring showed up. He insists it was to bring out the most emotion in him. La'an is with Pike, worried that he left out data in his report, like that she tried to kill Kirk. He makes her sit and have a drink. She admits she knows why she saw Harper, while the others saw family members. Starfleet is her family. She just wants to know what happened to the crew. He offers her a story about a haunted family farm. He says space is limitless in its beauty and its terror. Whatever you encountered, the only thing that matters is you survived. And that is all Starfleet needs to know. La'an sees a ship through a window. It's the Griffin being towed away by the USS Thor. And Harper is there in a window staring at La'an and making the motion shh. And that's where the episode ended. So I didn't think too much of this episode, but I can't say that I hated it either, as it concerns what the story was. I mean, I don't think it explored the human condition very much. I mean, they kind of explored some human condition related themes on like a surface level, it seems to me, but, nothing terribly profound. And I don't think what they covered was really new ground, except in the case of Kirk, who apparently did know David as a young child. and apparently didn't stay away, as he says in Star Trek II that Carol Marcus asked him to do, until some point after he had been in David's life, which is new information. And I suppose that's fine, but it was really the only new ground covered in this episode. Anything else that came out, about Spock or La'an, for example, were kind of, things about them that we knew already that they just expanded on a little bit. So I didn't think that, there was a whole lot of value to this story overall. And then, by the end, they don't tell you what happened. When the episode ends, you don't know what was going on. Were those supernatural entities that were messing with them? Were they just hallucinating as opposed to being messed with by actual entities? Whatever it was, how did it get there if it was an entity? And B, if it wasn't, what was making them hallucinate? Like, they don't tell you. Usually when they have these kinds of episodes, in the end, they'll tell you what was going on that made it seem like it was whatever it seemed like. But they don't do that in the end, and it was very annoying. And, this episode kind of ripped off a previous episode of TNG, Night Terrors. And it also kind of ripped off movies like Event Horizon and maybe even a little Dead Space, the video game. So that's not great. But getting back to Kirk, in this episode, Kirk literally says he was a Boy Scout, which of course contradicts something Carol says in The Wrath of Khan when she says to David, who calls him an overgrown Boy Scout, "Listen, kiddo, James Kirk was many things, but he was never a Boy Scout." So that means that she either lied to David or didn't know that he was a Boy Scout and emphatically stated that he wasn't to David anyway. So it's just one of those things that, how do you mess that up? How do you mess that up? Every Star Trek fan worth their salt knows that line. How do the writers not know it? And this is another example of why you have to consider this show as being in a separate universe, because it just does not line up with what came before. It just doesn't. It's so stupid. Anyway, it just wasn't great for all those reasons. And on top of that, I have a couple of nits to pick. When they get there on the Griffin, they discover, to their surprise, that there's no gravity. So they beamed over expecting there to be no gravity, but they weren't wearing gravity boots. Now, what kind of sense does that make? It makes zero sense. There's no way they would have done that. For that matter, why did they bother to investigate immediately at all? Why not just call it in? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And then, okay, they went over. I'd have gotten out of there so fast. I don't know how they said, hey, let's just walk around for a while once they saw that things were weird. I don't know how they could tell which phasers made the burns on the wall. At one point, it seemed like La'an was in command. I don't know why that would be. So that was weird. So, it was just a filler episode where all we saw during the whole thing were the Enterprise sets redressed. And we got a lot of weird experiences with 3 members of the crew, 2 members of the regular crew, and Kirk, who they cannot seem to stop bringing into the show, and a mystery with no explanation at the end. So it's just not great. And then, La'an seems to be back on regular duty at the end of the episode, where none of them should be, because they went through a traumatic thing and they need time off. So that didn't make any sense, especially since Dr. Mbenga acknowledges that they're mentally going to need some time to regroup. So I don't know. I just, I don't think it was horrible. I don't think it was a horrible episode. I just think it didn't have very much value. It was an inconsequential hour of the show that happened not to be terribly offensive if you overlook the Boy Scout thing. But, that's really it. There's not a lot more that I can say about it. I just hope that, the rest of the season is better. The first episode was pretty good. Let's hope that this is an anomaly of a not great episode and that the rest of the season is better. Because at best, this second episode was an episode that wasn't horrible and that managed to be a little bit better than some of the dumb episodes last season. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.